Story 1. Sadie, I am fully aware of how unbelievable the events I am about to describe to you are. From your point of view, I would not belie them either. I would think of them as a work of fiction, from that of a creative mind, but knowing what I have seen, I can arrive at no other conclusion. Think of me how you wish, insane or otherwise. S.E. All I ask is that you listen. The words I am now writing will probably be my last, for I believe I may have stumbled upon knowledge, either unknown to the world or kept a secret by those who have known the horror I have experienced, that will lead me to a most undesirable fate. I have always known I would be a writer. The encouragement of my wonderful mother encouraged me to pursue it. I was born a single child to a single mother. My imagination was my only solace during those times of childhood loneliness. Those experiences, however, were the seed that sprouted my love for writing. About 2 years ago, after graduating, I moved out west like I had always planned. I landed in suburban Colorado. My few releases were selling well enough to support me for the foreseeable future, but I knew I had to get some work done if I wanted to survive. As I began to settle into my new surroundings, the loneliness I mentioned before began to take hold of me once again. I've never been a ladies' man, so my chances of finding a girlfriend in this small town populated with mostly tourists and retired couples looked unmistakably bleak. So, seeing no alternative, I moved down a pedestal to the next best thing. I found Sadie in the local dog shelter. She was a mangy mass of long golden fur, and mud caked her paws and ears. Her piercing gaze never left me as I perused the scruffy animals in each cage. I continued to think about her even after my back was turned. I could feel her eyes on me all the time. As I made my way to her cage, I stared in amazement at the extreme intelligence I could see behind her brown and blinking eyes. After a couple minutes into our staring competition, her pink tongue slid out over her teeth, and her tail began wagging. I knew I had to keep her. Our connection was instantaneous and deeper than I can describe. Over the next couple months, Sadie's true intelligence turned from impressive to astonishing, and from astonishing to disturbing. She would pace around the house at night. Tables and household objects would be moved or tampered with. Some nights she would stare at me from the wooden frame of my doorway, her small silhouette the only thing visible against the bathroom light. But somehow I knew her eyes were fixed in mine. After my mind had had enough, I began locking my room at night to block the view of her piercing eyes. That was when my troubles began. Small tapping noises like the tapping of nails on the linoleum floor. After a few nights of delicately studying the rhythm of the noises, to my horror, I realized they could not be the footsteps of a canine. There was a person walking around in my house, and there had been for days. With shaking hands, I pulled myself out from under my blankets. I tiptoed as quietly as I could to my closet, retrieving a metal baseball bat. I crept as quietly as possible on the creaking carpet. As my shivering hands grasped the cold doorknob, I turned it. Slowly, I swung open the door, but Sadie wasn't there. I breathed a sigh of relief and slowly made my way down the stairs. Cool beads of sweat ran down my temple, tickling my cheeks. My hands tightened around the cold metal as the tapping continued. When I finally reached the bottom of the staircase, I turned my head around to face the kitchen as the footsteps continued. I tiptoed down the corridor to the kitchen. I laid the bat down on my right shoulder, and with careful and delicate movements, I peeked my head around the corner. My eyes widened and covered my mouth to withhold my scream. Before my bewildered eyes, I saw her. Her golden, long, hairy body was slouched over. Her front legs curled like a giant praying mantis. Sadie was walking on 2 feet. I was frozen in fear, unable to move or tear my eyes away from this horrific scene. Her mouth and snout burled and curled as she let out terrible grunts. It sounded like a man who was trying to speak while being strangled. Her sharp teeth flashed in the candle light. Dread and confusion overtook me as I darted back behind the wall. Was she trying to speak? Oh God, was she trying to speak? I shut my eyes and shivered, too scared to move a muscle. Suddenly, a loud boom of metal against wood resounded throughout the quiet house. With teeth, thinking the bat had loosed itself from my sweating hands and fell to the ground. My eyes darted back to Sadie to see her what she would do. Her head turned, her eyes behind a tangled mop of hair peered to the hallway opening. She immediately dropped back on all fours, tail wagging. I ran back to my room, not caring what noise I made. I quickly shut the door and locked it, then locked myself in my bathroom for good measure. I sobbed as I heard scratching at my bedroom door. I slept in the bathtub all night, and the next day, too scared to leave after many hours and knowing I couldn't stay there indefinitely, I slowly unlocked the bathroom door. I crept quietly down the stairs once again, trying my best to not make a noise. I never wanted to see her again. I knew I would never forget her stare as long as I lived. I crept to the kitchen again to make a break for the front door. I sighed as I realized she wasn't in the kitchen. I ran to the front door and I scrambled to unlock it. Suddenly behind me I heard a low snarl. My head slowly turned around. To my absolute horror, she was standing in the doorway, licking her long jagged teeth. Her face jittered and convulsed. She began to speak once again. H-U-N-G-R-G-R-G-R-Y-Y-Y-Y-Y double quotes. My shaking hands tried to turn the lock, but she was too fast. In an instant she was on top of me. Her long, jagged teeth sunk deep into my forearm. The pain was indescribable, sending shockwaves up my arm and into my body. I began to sob as she tore flesh from my arm, growling and snarling. Blood flew from her foaming mouth as she dug deeper. Out of fear and desperation, I began to dig at her left eye. I dug and scratched, blood pouring from the wound onto my fingers like a fountain. It felt squishy and wet like digging into a cup of watery jello. I pulled it out and threw it away onto the wood floor. She let go, staggered back, moaning and howling in pain. I staggered back to the hallway, retrieving my bat. Blood covered the floor and my hands. With tears filling my eyes, I began laying blows down onto her head. With each blow, her howls became quieter. Teeth, flesh, and deep blood sprayed from the tattered corpse until all that remained of her head was a scattered, mushy pile of teeth and flesh. I dropped to my knees and sobbed bitterly on the floor for what seemed hours. It was hours before I called an ambulance. I spent a week in the hospital. I never told the doctors the truth about how I got the injury because they would only laugh. I merely told them my dog bit me. They encouraged me to receive a shot for rabies. I comply. I can say until I'm blue in the face how true this story is, but that won't convince you. I'm telling this story not to relieve my soul of the burden of my tale, but to simply share the truth. I will carry this horror and all its unanswered questions for the rest of my life. I still don't know all the facts, and I know that thirst for answers will never be quenched. However, I do know one thing. Ever since it happened, all the dogs I've seen won't stop staring. Story 2. Sprawl and its D. Contents. Alice is telling the guys she doesn't know that she wants to see the end of the world. They aren't talking to her. No one is talking to her. The party happens around her without touching her, as if she is hermetically sealed outside. It's snowing. She pauses for a second on the patio next to the four kids, smoking and discussing Nick Rogue movies. Time slip crush on Julie Christie. They don. Notice Alice. The falling snow looks like pieces of something that exploded in the sky and is now drifting downward. She pushes the rubble off her shoulders and hair. She walks into the woods. The forest is behind the house having the party. Typical semester break thing. Everyone home from school and getting drunk with old friends they hate. This is the new growth exurbs the homes of the parents with 2-hour commutes and kids raised by daycare. These woods Alice is walking into are the old growth forests. These are the woods that have always been. The trees are all white, with stark dead branches for arms. It's here, out on the margins of the forest, where she first saw the white thing. Her footsteps crunch and press into the bright ground. Motion detector leg. HDS pick up on the way she walks, like a magnet being thrown at a refrigerator. Her bright red ballet flats look like she's bleeding, but the only trail is her footsteps. How does the Little Mermaid story really end? Not the Disney version. The first version, the real version. What happens to Ariel again? What always happens to girls in fairy tales? You watch her walk out of the party and off the patio and through the backyard and into the trees. You say hi to the smoking kids. They look like fireflies in winter. You're friends with Nate and he's there. You just quit smoking. You want to smoke 1 billion cigarettes. You just ask Nate for one. Out in the yard, the snow looks like jigsaw puzzle pieces. The only way you know how to build them is to find the flat edges and build borders first. These snowflakes melt on your hand before you can see where they fit. You hate these parties. You're trying to stay sober, and it's awful. All these kids with their Jell-O shots and Jell-O laughter and Jell-O thighs. You just got out of treatment. Treatment wasn't cool. You shouldn't be here, not right now. Edward, the counselor at the center, always said when you leave treatment, imagine that you are in Italy, because you were in a very fragile place in your recovery. You hate people who say things and wait for you to laugh. You know us in THI's really shallow way. If she's the pond, you're the rock skimming across the surface. You went to high school with her and had a muted crush on her. You didn't have any class together because she had it together. You had it unraveled. There was this phenomenal distance to her that you found fascinating. Like she didn't belong to the world, your world, anyway. Now your world is dry and boring. You watch everyone around you unravel. Recreationally, Friday night for them can be drinks and no consequences. For you, alcohol is the accelerant in the abandoned building of your heart. Why, who is a building on fire? You haven't seen the white thing, which is your neighborhood's ex-urban legend. Friends have, though. Mallory claimed she saw it coming home from the beach the night she stranded everyone there because Gray was hooking up with that girl with the bleached hair and teeth the color of surrender flags. She thought it was a weird white deer. Connor almost hit it, Doctor, driving home drunk one night, he alleged. Everyone thinks that's what he did hit the one night he wasn't so lucky. He said it was a freaky white worm thing, like a great like caterpillar at the edge of the woods, suddenly visible as he drove by. The most detailed report of the white thing was Nate's version. The fact that he was on massive amounts of acid should be taken into account, but still, in Nate's words, everybody else had gone back inside the house to watch a movie. Donnie Darko LOL. I'm super fucked up, and I want to go for a walk. It's beautiful outside. It's late, but I'm walking very carefully on the shoulder of Route 39. The snowflakes look like stars landing on the street. Then I remember Mallory telling that weird story about that thing she saw. All of the sudden things feel off, like the temperature changed, or the street lights started making a different noise. There are no cars either. None. You can see the traffic lights swinging, one side blinking red, the other yellow, and then they're under those lights in the middle of the road. Down the hill you could see it. The white thing, the thing moved weird, I guess. As it was hopping. That sounds so fun. So carefree. It wasn't carefree, it wasn't fun. This wasn't marbles and hopscotch shit. You could tell its body was big and lumpy, and it was white, like fur, I guess, but dingy, like a faded outfit. I think it was about 80 feet away, and it looked at me. Big, weird ears or horns or something flop on top of its head. And then it cocked its head to the right and just stopped. I felt like I could feel all the air around me, like the individual particles of the air. I could tell it was looking at me. Its eyes. I know I was too far away to see them, but I could. They looked like huge circular swimming pools filled with black rotten water. I could smell it too, like spoiled meat cooking. When it held out its hand, standing there, under those swaying traffic lights, I just stood there, unable to move. It wanted me to come to it. It wanted me, and then there's a car, out of nowhere behind me, honking and skidding and then coming to a stop like 10 feet past me. This dude gets out, screaming at me, telling me I'm in the middle of the street. He could have killed me, and I'm just screaming back to him about the fucking rabbit, and he's like, what fucking rabbit? And I'm like, that big fucking rabbit under the lights, and he points down the hill screaming, there's no fucking rabbit, you crazy motherfucker. And, of course, he was right, no fucking rabbit, nothing. But I don't drive on that road anymore, ever. All Alice ever sees is the color back when she was a kid in her booster seat of her parents' SUV. She remembered vivid flashes of white whenever they were driving past long stretches of forest. At her bedroom window, when she was little, for she fell asleep, the white would creep up the glass. She had weird dreams as a kid. Deer with their legs caught on some fence decaying. GMO wheat twisting into fields. Drilling trucks pouring hot, diseased runoff into the lakes. And always bursts of white. The white thing started coming in her window when she turned 12. It was the color of bone It never said anything. It pulled her blankets down. She started not being able to sleep. Whenever she did, she'd have these ultra-vivid dreams of subdivisions on fire. White fires burning blocks all the way down to he ground in the clearing of the forest, where kids come to smoke pot and make out. She sees the white thing just where it said it would be. It touches her. The pine trees and white birches bend around her in the dead of the living forest. The white thing talks to her in whispers made of the echoes of bulldozers and the scratch of blueprints for new homes. You watch. She's holding a gasoline can, now the kind people use for their lawnmowers. The whispers are an orchestra made of crickets and cicadas. Alice is walking away now. She doesn't look at you. Her red shows are little fires at the edges of things as she walks back to the party. It's still snowing, and the snowflakes are all over the trees and you and the ground. The white thing steps on them as it walks to you, breathing heavily, its body distorted and luminous. The snowflakes don't look like anything anymore. They blow in the wind, spiraling above the flames and the sirens and the illuminated evening falling over everyone and everything. Bright and cold and white. Story 3. Crash Hand. There wasn't much about 2015 that didn't completely suck. My marriage was falling to pieces. My spouse had grown cold and indifferent. Our son hadn't been diagnosed with autism yet. He was still a toddler. But we knew there was something off about him. We knew something was wrong. By summer I'd moved my belongings into the guest quarters, and that became my bedroom. It was the beginning of the end, with the two of us in bitter denial, or possibly waiting for the other tea. Oh, and at first a 5 a.m. alarm got me up for work every weekday morning, and I spent most wakeful moments trying to find a way out of dump truck driving and construction. My spouse was less than supportive. I didn't have the funds for college. I was too busy to learn a new trade or skill. Once in a while I'd come up with a cool sketch or painting. Sometimes I'd write a poem that people appreciated, but I didn't have the talent or skill to replace the earnings of my day job. So every weekday it was a 10 to 12-hour shift of double clutching a tandem axle Mack. I'd haul a flatbed trailer with heavy equipment for a paving crew to get the mortgage and bills paid. The second Friday of June didn't seem any different from any other weekday. It was payday. I planned on ending time with my little one, putting him to bed, and getting into a cheap bottle of whiskey before passing out in the guest room. For the time being, I was still on the clock and getting ready for my last run. My foreman, Mike, asked me as a special favor to take an overloaded flatbed a few miles down the road. Normally I would have said no, but I liked Mike. I didn't want to argue, and I just wanted to wrap up the day and start my weekend. My worst-case scenario, I thought, was an overload fine from a DOT officer. The crew loaded a paver, a skid steer, and a roller onto a flat T-bead trailer designed to hold 2/3 of the combined weight of all that equipment. Everything was already chained down. I told the guys I'd see them in the yard after I hooked up to the trailer. I eased off the clutch and into first gear. I could feel the Mack truck struggle to pull the overloaded flatbed trailer. I got to my first traffic light without demolishing the dump truck stood ahead of me only because I began to downshift and brake well ahead of time. I realized my seat belt was off and tried to put it on, but it wouldn't budge. The light turned green, the sky opened up, and a torrential downpour pissed all over everything in sight. I started driving, but kept the rig 10 miles per hour below the posted speed limit, convinced that would keep me safe. I passed a quarry on my left and began my descent down a steep grade on the way to my stop. I got part of the way down the ominous hill, and traffic was stopped ahead in the distance. I gently applied the brakes, but the truck tires started skidding on the wet road. The trailer began to jackknife over the double yellow lines into oncoming motorists. I eased off the brakes, regained control of the trailer, and reapplied them. The same thing happened. All the while I'm still moving toward stopped traffic going 30 miles an hour downhill, with a combined vehicle weight easily exceeding 60,000 pounds. The old country road had one lane headed downhill, one lane headed uphill, no shoulders, and nothing but trees on either side. As a last-ditch effort, I pulled the parking brake and started stabbing at the brake pedal. Crashing a commercial truck is almost always fatal for the driver. Not having a working seat belt wasn't really helping my odds. The cars stop ahead were now less than two tractor-trailer lengths away, and I couldn't stop the truck. I thought about my wife. I remembered being in love with her before we started hating each other. I thought about my son. I thought about the people stopped ahead and their families. I thought about how much it was going to suck dying in a dump truck from colliding into the trees on the side of the road. A collision was inevitable, and there was no way in hell I was going to allow innocent motorists to get killed. My last run had turned into a suicide mission. Being a non-religious heathen, I thought, perchance there might be something close by, some ghost that watches over truckers and bikers, some spirit, perhaps, inhabiting those woods. I called out to it, "Make it quick." That was my first and final tear to whatever sprite inhabits that forest. I didn't see any fucking way possible I'd survive what I'd do next, and I didn't want to linger in agony following the crash. I just wanted my DTH to be swift. I turned the steering wheel away from the traffic and into the woods. As soon as my front wheels left the pavement, the bumpy, wooded terrain shook me violently, throwing me into a world of hurt like I'd never known. As an at-risk teen, I'd been jumped, hit with chains and bats. I'd been beaten mercilessly by my bastard of a father as a child. Nothing I'd experienced could have prepared me for the beating the inside of that truck put on every inch of my body. The trailer snapped off and headed into another portion of the woods. The truck roared into the forest with me as its hostage, mowing down vegetation, leaving hunks of metal all about us. The tree branches of the forest fought back against this hostile, diesel-powered invasion. I gripped the wheel for dear life while smacking all about the console, the control panel, the shifter, and feeling every abrasive texture grind away at my flesh. The truck hit a big bump that sent me head first into the ceiling. Blood went everywhere. Then it hit a dip and skidded to a violent stop. A terrible pressure pushed into my chest. I thought I was having a heart attack. Somehow, I didn't go flying through the glass. As the horrifying ordeal came to an abrupt halt, as quickly as the crash ended, so did that awful blow to my chest. I exited the smoldering wreck that was once a sturdy Mack truck. I was overed in blood, and had what seemed like a sheet of plastic, a grocery bag perhaps, stuck to my head. It wasn't a grocery bag hanging off my head. I didn't realize at the moment that my scalp had been partially degloved. It peeled right off my noggin, my skull exposed and blood pouring all over me. It was hanging off the side of my head, I imagine, much like a peel hanging off the side of a piece of fruit. It must have happened when I hit the ceiling of the truck's interior. What hurt more than anything at the moment was my chest. It couldn't have been the steering wheel. It wasn't a heart attack. I didn't know what it was that kung fu'd the ever-living shit out of my sternum. I was just glad I was still alive. Only moments later I was getting put into a C-collar, strapped to a backboard, and loaded into an ambulance by paramedics. My Blitz t-shirt, my favorite fucking punk rock shirt, was blood-soaked and sheared off me by the medics. They took my vitals and asked questions each to gauge my level of consciousness. Then, for a moment or two, they fell silent. Am I gonna make it? I choked as I turned my head to see both medics staring at my numb mouths agape and eyes bugged out in bewilderment. After a second, they assured me everything would be fine and continued with routine measures during medical transport. I thought about the day's events at the hospital. I got all doped up by the docs, got my scalp stapled and bandaged, and got admitted to my room. I thought about my terrible judgment, the last-minute decision, the dying man's prayer, and the blow to the chest while crashing and somehow not flying through the windshield. I thought about it all in my hospital room. I stood bare-chested before a mirror gazing at my bruise. Across my chest, spanning about 12 inches in length, was a deep purple mark in the shape of a giant, ghastly hand. Story 4, Sarconia. January 1st, 1786. First entry. My name is James Hawke. I am an English explorer. This is the log of my ship, the Dacidania. Today, we set sail from Cholerac Island with fresh provisions and repairs. Our objective is simple: to find new islands or possibly continents. For the Queen, Her Majesty, has commissioned us to find one island in particular, though the island known as Sarconia. Why exactly Her Majesty wants us to find this one island is unclear to me. I do not ask questions, though I simply do as I am told. Cholerac Island is supposedly close to Sarconia, so that is the starting point of our expedition for Sarconia. We have already located several other exotic islands. This will be our last island. After this we will return to England. I must end this entry now, for I am required on deck. James Hawke. January 2nd, 1786. Today, I had a most unsettling experience down in the hold. I had gone down to bring up certain objects of dubious legality when there was a thump ahead in the shadows. This in itself was neither disturbing nor unusual. It could be a barrel that fell over. The cat we kept down there to keep out the rats, or, heavens forbid, a rat itself. As I stepped forward, lantern lit, to check, I discovered that it was, in fact, none of these. Nothing was visible within the shadows or the section when my lantern chased them away. I looked up in time to see something darting around the crates where I could not follow. I stepped forward, noticing a small white patch of fur stained with blood. Shifting the crates, I discovered a shocking sight. Nothing, whatever it was long gone, and so it seemed, was the cat. January 3rd, 1986, today. I am proud to announce that we have sighted what we believe to be Sarconia. It looks like a quite nice place to relax. Perhaps that is why the Queen wishes us to find it. On a rather more grim note, the steersman, Alexander, has gone missing. This leaves us a hand short. We are conducting a search of the entire ship tonight, January 4th. 1786 today. I am the herald of tidings, both good and bad. The good news is that we have found Alexander and the hold unconscious. The bad is that he appears to have come down with a fever of sorts up. On revival, he began shouting and screaming, and now refuses to steer us into the island. Exactly why he does not want to land there is unknown. He simply refuses to move, shouting at us. What he is saying is both disturbing and cryptic. He speaks of the one-eyed torturer, the beast in the hold, and other nonsense. However, as long as he remains in such a state, we cannot saint into the island. Unfortunately, this is the least of our problems with him. He has injured himself and written cryptic messages in his own blood. The strangest message he has written, however, is Cr. Oton greater than Roanoke Croton. We do not understand what he means by this, although we do know that Croton and Roanoke are two islands discovered years back. However, Alexander has, to the extent of our knowledge, never heard of this. January 5th, 1786 today, we woke to the crashing of rocks and wood. We all rushed on deck to discover a grim sight. Alexander had lashed the tiller and wheel in the direction of the island before winding his crucifix tightly around his hand and committing suicide with a knife. The ship had driven straight into Sarconia. Nobody has been injured other than a Lexander. We are fortunate. After we have salvaged any supplies that we can, we will go ashore. January 6th, 1786 today, we went ashore. The island is a pleasant enough place. However, there is a vague unease about the place. We will set camp and sleep on the shore of the island tonight. We have committed Alexander's body to the sea. The crucifix was in a death grip about his hand, so we simply left it there. Oddly, Alexander had carved a message into his own flesh before he killed himself. It simply said he comes. The island is rather strange. Although it is a tropical paradise, I have heard no birds or any other animals. The trees rustle and sway as though in a wind, and yet the wind is blowing in a different direction. We will discover more in the morning. January 7th, 1786 today, we went further inland. The eerie silence continues, save for the occasional noise in the distance. We are unsure what they are, but they are certainly now of natural causes. We are not alone. The word Croton has been carved into several trees we have passed so far. Who carved them? What does Croton mean? In any case, our destination is the summit of the mountain on the island where we will stake our claim for England. This search party, me included, consists of 4 of our 8-man crew. The rest of the crew are back at the landing site. Reply. Ring the ship, January 8th, 1786 today. I awoke to find out that one of the other 3 men was gone. His tent was normal. His sleeping bag was ruffled like he had risen early, and there were no signs of trouble. He was simply gone. Whether he was taken by means of force or simply got up and left for reasons known only to himself remains a mystery. However, It is my personal belief that if he had left voluntarily, he would have taken his equipment with him. We will continue towards the mountain and hope to find the missing man on the way, January 9th. 178. 6 today, I awoke to find everything normal. Nobody had vanished during the night. This is a good sign. However, Mandolin, a crewman, reported hearing strange noises and seeing strange visions during the night. I believe he was dreaming. I sleep lightly, and I heard nothing, I saw nothing, and I am starting to believe the other two men are crazy or extremely paranoid. Over. Remain cool. I have been on too many expeditions to let tales of spooks and ghouls frighten me. We will press on. January 10th, 1786 today. We found the missing man's body. He was naked, lying in a clearing, his eyes wide open and his mouth in an eternal scream. No cause of death is apparent. I mentioned earlier that I would not quit. I retract this. We are going back to the landing site and getting off Saconia, January 11th, 1786. We are now back at the landing site. Nothing is here. The tools of the other for men are still here, but the men themselves are long gone. The ship is also gone. The crew appears to have repaired it and left. A little further exploration turned up a note. The note said, we are getting off the island. The night is dangerous. Do not go to sleep. Build a raft and get off Saconia now. May God have mercy on your soul should you remain. If you hear Drew, the rest of the letter was gone. Needless to say, we have begun construction of a raft. Night is fast approaching. Should the rest of the crew be believed, tonight will be a dangerous one. We will keep watch. January 11th, night. 1976. It is now night. I heard some of the strange sounds and saw some of the visions mentioned by Mandolin. They were of the most disturbing variety. One thing I saw was the missing crew member walking about. He came to the shoreline and lay down as if sleeping. Then he was dragged away by an unseen force backwards into the forest. Another was that the moment the sun went down, a deep blackness began reading across the woods. Screams and howls, as well as other animal noises, begun to reach our ears. I kept watch while the other to build more of the raft. Then, extremely disturbing noises reached our ears just as the blackness hit the edge of the woods. Agonized screams rang out. Crying and thumps began. Then, suddenly, we began hearing thuds, drums. They were far away in the rue Enkel when we first heard them, but they are getting closer and closer. The note mentioned Drew. I think it must have meant drums. We must get off the island. The drums are now past our last campsite. The raft is almost finished. The drums are coming. They're speeding up. They're almost out of the woods. They're out of the... This is the last journal entry. The rest of the pages are blank. Story 5. The draft. It's been a while since I wrote anything. I apologize to my fans for making them think I have writer's block or something. I can assure you that I haven't lost my toe. And I am full of inspiration. Something just came up. You see, I've been doing some research lately, for my new story, and you'll never believe what happened while I was doing that. I was planning on writing a short horror story about a haunted castle. I love classic stories with a twist. So that was right up my street. The location was an site choice, since I live in an 800-year-old town in Germany, and there is a castle near my house. I snooped around there for a while, looked at some old paintings, strolled through the load cellars, and climbed the towers. It was perfect. The entire time I was there I felt the anxiety growing. We all know the feeling of being watched. The feeling that someone is following you, our every move from the shadows. The longer I stayed in the castle, the stronger that feeling got. Yes, this old building would be the perfect setting for my new story. After thanking the castle's owner for letting me have a look around, I went to the local library to dig up dirt on the previous owners. I knew that regents and knights had lived there. Perhaps one of them killed a servant girl or wife during the Dark Ages. That would make for a brilliant Bloody Mary-like story. What I found, however, was way better than that. As it turns out, there used to be a Jewish temple in that old castle, right up until the Nazis decided to evict them. Of course, a World War II gore story about Nazis torturing Jewish children is not really my style. But you all know I like to shock my readers. The muses were with me on this one. The story had already started to form in my mind, and it was getting better by the minute. I checked out a few books on Nazi torture practices and a book on local genealogy for inspiration. The librarian gave me a funny look, but as he was used to me taking strange books home, he didn't say anything about it. When I got home, I began writing immediately. I always write the first draft by hand instead of using a computer. It just feels better, more comfortable that way. It's almost as if my pen has a will of its own, and it does a lot of the work for me. After an hour or two, I had finished writing the draft and decided to go to bed early. I slept like a baby that night. Little did I know that would be my last good night sleep for weeks to come. When I woke up the next morning, I made coffee, like I always do, and decided to read over my work before typing another draft on my laptop. I looked over at my desk, but it was empty. I remembered that the maid usually places everything I leave on my desktop in the drawer, so I didn't think anything of it. I opened the drawer only to find it empty. Now I was starting to worry. I checked the trash, searched my house, but I didn't find anything. Naturally, I got angry with the maid for throwing out my work, but it wasn't as if I couldn't write the story a second time. I rewrote my first draft, placed it in an envelope marked "Do Not Throw Out," and went out for a walk. It was raining outside. I remember this because it hasn't stopped raining since. I always enjoy long walks in the rain. I find it inspiring to look at the bleak, empty streets while water pours down in seemingly endless streams. So I walked for a good 30 minutes. When I returned home, I poured myself a glass of white wine and walked over to my desk. The envelope was still in its place. I booted up my laptop and opened the envelope. My draft was gone again. My draft had been replaced with a small, old-looking scrap of paper. There were only 2 words written on it: HR off. Translated from German. Stop it. I really didn't know what it was I was supposed to quit doing, but I had a feeling somebody was trying to play a prank on me. Messages like this one only appeared under mysterious circumstances in my books, not in real life. I decided not to rewrite the draft by hand. I started typing, but the words just wouldn't flow. As far as I knew, nobody. That my mother had a key to my house, and this kind of prank is definitely not her sense of humor. I couldn't figure out who could have done this, and I was stuck with the story, so I decided to go out and get a couple of drinks. The next morning I booted up my laptop and loaded my save file. The single chapter I had written had been deleted and replaced by the same two words that were on the note, repeated hundreds of times. HR off, HR off, HR off, HR off, HR off. A chill ran all the way down my spine when I read it. Paranoid questions dominated my thoughts. Had someone broken into my home? How did they know my password? And most importantly, were they here while I was sleeping? I was going out of my mind pondering those questions, so I decided to play a prank on the prankster to calm myself down. I wrote the same chapter for the fourth night in a row, but this time I wrote an extra line at the end. If you delete this, I will destroy you. I spent the rest of the day buying a few cameras and setting them up in every room of the house so I could catch whoever it was that kept breaking into my house. After that, I spent hours pacing the room, waiting for night to come. I finally fell asleep in front of the TV. Dreams of burglars haunted me all night, until a bright flash of lightning and a loud crash of thunder woke me up. I checked my watch and saw that it was almost 8 in the morning. Drowsy from the restless night, I made some coffee and walked back to the living room. As soon as I sat down, I jumped back up and, remembering the cameras, ran to my laptop to check if I had caught the culprit in the act. Deleting my story again, my story was gone, and another message had replaced it, in English this time. Not if I get to you first. I picked up the camera aimed at my desk and pressed the replay button. The screen showed my desk with my laptop on it, my chair, the random clutter that is my desktop. Nothing out of the ordinary. I pressed fast forward to speed things up a bit. Suddenly, at 5:30 in the morning, the screen showed nothing but static for 2 minutes. I hit rewind and watched those 2 minutes again to see if I could make out anything. Between the static, I couldn't. It turned out that all the cameras showed nothing but static between 5:30 and 5:32 a.m. After that, my story wasn't deleted again. However, that's what and the accidents started to happen. It started out with little things. I slipped in the shower, cut my hand while making a sandwich, minor mishaps like that. But the further I progressed with the story, the more serious my accidents became. Last week I tripped and fell off the sidewalk, right in front of an oncoming bus. I managed to roll out of the way, but I could have sworn I heard someone laughing. The kind of high-pitched, maniacal laugh you hear ghosts make in corny horror movies. __. Maybe I am going crazy. Maybe writing all those horror stories about rape and murder and psychotic breakdowns has taken its toll. Yesterday my house burned down. I managed to save my laptop and a camera. I plan on going back to the castle where it all began. Perhaps there I'll find a clue as to what's happening to me. I'm trying to look on the bright side, though. Even if I die due to one of these accidents, at least I got a good, cheesy horror story out of it. Story 6. Lullaby. I have had a keen interest in the supernatural ever since I was 7 years old. That door in our house that slammed itself shut back in 1990 was my first scary encounter. Yes, I know there are more frightening occurrences in the world than that, and ever since then I've had several other experiences, some similar and some that were a bit more intense. I don't know why I'm so unlucky, but the paranormal has followed me pretty much into every house I have ever lived in and every place that I have worked at. Our current place of residence is no exception. A small two-bedroom apartment is what we call home. My wife, myself, and our two kids, Nick and Candace, have been living happily here for about 5 years. It's close to their school, close to where we work, close to both my parents and my in-laws, and close to a shopping mall. From time to time we've heard some strange sounds in our home, mostly at night, but nothing that truly convinced us that it was supernatural. Because of the size of our place, it's fairly easy to pick up sounds and little noises from any of the rooms, and we would usually think of rational explanations for them. It's probably the wind that blew over that container on the kitchen counter, or the batteries in that two-year-old. So that's probably why it started playing by itself, but we never actually got up to investigate. I think deep down, and not wanting to admit to each other, my wife and I feared that we might walk in on something that we didn't really want to see. Nick never slept right through, and like clockwork, would walk into our room at about 23:30 every night and climb into our bed. If we happened to be awake at that time, my wife would take him back to his own bed, but often we were fast asleep and would wake up the next morning with him snuggled in between us. One Sunday morning we woke up with the little guy in our bed, and while drinking coffee he asked us who visited last night. You were with us, dummy. You know that no one visited last night. We laughed. No, he said. Last night when I walked into your room there was a lady in your room, standing there by Daddy's closet. My wife and I looked at each other, and I knew that she believed him, and she could tell that I did too. When I was 11, my then baby sister told my mom that she saw and had a conversation with an old man who was sitting on her bed. Not certain why she'd have an elderly man as an imaginary friend, my mom decided to take my sister to a child psychologist who, to my mom's horror, told her that kids do not lie about these things and that he truly believed her. My mom never went into my sister's room by herself after that. So we kind of played the whole thing down and changed the subject every time Nick would ask about our visitor. After about 2 weeks, the incident was forgotten. One morning we woke up, Nick still sleeping between us again, and just lay there talking about random things, when Candace walked into our room and kissed us as she normally did after getting up in the mornings. We invited her to lie down with us as it was a Saturday and we were in no rush to get up and start the day, but she wanted to go watch the kiddie shows on the television in the lounge. She walked out the room, and with her cheery voice we heard her greet someone hello, and gave a cute little chuckle. Again my wife and I just looked at each other wide-eyed and called Candy. See, back to our room. Who did you greet in the lounge just now? I asked her with a smile. The old lady. Daddy, came her reply. I got up and walked to the lounge and obviously saw no one. So without making further ado, I switched the television on and she watched her favorite shows. Again, we didn't make mention or ask further questions about the lady, as my kids didn't know about things such as ghosts, and as far as they were concerned, the only supernatural being that came to our home was the Sandman. Months passed without any sightings or talk of the lady, except jokingly between my wife and I, usually after the kids were asleep and she had to go make us coffee, which we would drink while watching movies in bed. "Say hi to the old lady for me on your way back" would normally get my wife running back to the room and earn me a smack from her on my shoulder. Little did I know that the joking was going to catch up to me eventually. Candace talked and he are asleep a lot, and we would sit in bed many nights listening to her mumbling, trying to make out what she was saying and wondering what she was dreaming about. One particular summer's night I woke up and heard Candace talking up a storm, but at the same time I could hear what sounded like a soft voice singing. Our bedroom window was open during the hot nights, so I dismissed it as sounds coming from outside and rolled over and fell asleep again. This started happening more frequently, though, at least every third night. And every time I got up from my bed and start walking to the kids' room, Candace would stop talking and the singing would disappear before I could get through their door. I'd stand there in silence and wait for a sound, but nothing would happen. Again, I thought that it must have been sounds from outside, because as I walked out of my room the singing would stop. It made sense to me. The next couple of days we had unusually chilly weather, so we closed our bedroom windows at night, and guess what? I did not hear the singing. I was relieved, but it didn't last too long. On one of these cold nights I was lying in bed, awake while the rest of my household was asleep, thinking of everything from work to what we would eat the next evening. Candace starts mumbling, but after a couple of seconds it starts to sound like she's having a terrible nightmare. The soft mumbling has become much louder, and I could hear that she's very scared. Just then the soft singing started too. I got up slowly and quietly made my way out of our bedroom. Each step I took towards the kids' room made my heart beat a little faster as the singing kept growing louder and louder, clearer and clearer, where in the past it started disappearing as I neared the room. Standing right outside the kids' door, I heard Candace's mumbling dying down, but the soft singing, clearly a woman's voice, continued. Chills sprinted up and down my spine. My legs started feeling like they do when you run away from someone in a dream, like jelly, while I could feel cold beads of sweat dripping down my side. My mouth went dry instantly as I listened to this sweet-sounding lullaby, one which I've never heard before and will now never forget. Blacks and bays, dapples and grays. Go to sleep, little baby. I knew I had to confront whoever or whatever was in the room with my kids, so I took a breath and slowly started pushing the door open. When you wake you shall have. The singing stopped abruptly as I peeked around the door. She just sat there on my daughter's bed, arms folded in her lap and head turned towards me. We just looked at each. I wanted to but couldn't get my eyes off of her. Then she just carried on singing softly. All the pretty little horses. My wife said she found me lying in the kids' doorway and helped me back to bed. Apparently I was ice cold, sweating a lot. I myself can't remember what happened after those last few words she sang. I must have blacked out, but the strange thing is that my kids have been sleeping very well since that night. I wish I could say the same for myself. Story 7. SC. Raggly hair. It was a Friday night, and I was grounded, without a phone. I lived alone, with my dad in a rural community where everyone knows each other, but some keep to themselves. My dad headed up to bed around 11 o'clock, and I began to get ready to carry out the plans I had made during the school day. Since I had no phone, my friends and I made plans during the school day to all meet up at my best friend Greg's house around midnight. After putting on some warm clothes, going on my computer for a bit, and getting a snack, I was ready to sneak out. My dad took my phone he day before, but didn't take my car keys, assuming I had nowhere to go if I had no phone. Tiptoeing towards the front door, I remembered that my keys were on my dresser in my room. I turned and headed upstairs. I carefully avoided the spots on my floor where I knew if I stepped would let out a creak. I walked down my dark and quiet hallway, the distant hum of the air conditioner providing a white noise for my mind to focus on. As I approached my room, I felt a strange presence, and I suddenly became uneasy. I paused in my open doorway, breathing softly in fear my dad would discover that I was planning on going out. Seeing that my shoes were on, I waited for a moment and flipped my light switch. I quickly snatched my keys up off of my dresser and faced the doorway, still feeling the presence. My stomach stirred and gave me a ticklish feeling in my throat. I began to let my mind play with me, thinking of creatures or killers that may lay around the corner of the dark hallway that lay in front of me. I swallowed my fear and quickly exited my room, switching the light off and rounding the corner. I was cautious as I approached the corner that intersected the staircase, my dad's room, and the guest bedroom. I kept my eyes on the stairs and descended quicker than I had came up. A little spooked, I got out of the house as fast as I could and into the cool summer night. The moon was at its first quarter, and my yard was slightly illuminated. All the neighbors' houses were dark and slightly outlined by the moonlight. I quietly slipped into my car and shut the door as softly as I could while still securely shutting it. After the feeling I got inside, I couldn't help but to look in the back seat and as I entered, to avoid detection, I kept my lights off and shifted the car into reverse. My driveway is very long and on a slight incline, so I began to roll slowly down. As I did this, I looked for a good radio station, and my attention was deterred to the radio. After finding a decent station with tolerable reception, I looked back up to the dashboard and slammed on my brakes. The light in my room was on. The entire house was dark except for that room in the upper left-hand corner. I shifted the car into park and sat there tense and nervous. What worried me is that there were no other lights on in the house. If my dad had gone into my room, it would make sense that he would turn his light on, and the hallway light as well. In order to see where he was going, I sat there for a few moments, my eyes locked on the two windows that expose my room until I saw a shadow. It was partial and large against the left wall. It was still, and I thought it was my lamp or something, until it moved away. My eyes stayed fixed on the spot where the shadow was, until I saw movement in the right window. Slowly walking into view, a large, burly figure centered himself in the right window. I inhaled sharply, and my heart fluttered as the figure stopped, facing adjacent to me towards my door. Time froze, and it slowly turned to face the window. Its clothes were indistinguishable from its hair, which reached down several feet, blending into the matte, dark color of its clothes. Its hair was scraggly and disheveled, and its figure was wide and tall. It stood there, its face hidden by the hair, a silhouette in my window. I was frozen in horror. I had no idea what to do but to sit there, hoping it was a joke my dad was pulling on me. Could my dad be playing a joke on me? No, there was no way. I had never seen anything like it before, and I felt as if I was dreaming. I started to become lightheaded as I trembled and began to hyperventilate. I sat erect, eyes fixed on the figure that stood as still as a statue, staring out the window. My jaw trembled, and goosebumps covered my arms, legs, and neck. I opened the door of my car and got out, exposed to the silence of the night that was broken only slightly by the faint sounds of a radio advertisement and my panicked breathing. I slowly approached the house, keeping my eyes on the window. Why? No particular plan in mind. I looked forward at the front door and then back up to my room. I stopped in my tracks as I saw the figure slowly exit my room. Instantly after it disappeared to the doorway. I thought it could only be going one place, my dad's room. A sudden boost of adrenaline shot through my body as I ran to the front door and burst through screaming as loud as I could. I shouted unintelligibly as I leapt up the stairs, skipping 3 at a time. I reached the landing on the second floor and turned to my dad's door. Surprisingly, it was closed. I CD my hand on the doorknob and burst into the room with the mental image of the figure following close behind me. My dad was sitting up in bed, yelling at me in confusion to ask what was going on. I felt relief wash over my body, along with a burst of fear, thinking that it had not yet reached the room. I continued forward as I turned my body to face the door. I backed up and fell onto my dad's bed, my eyes fixed on the doorway. My dad continued to question me in a concerned and bewildered manner. I told him to be quiet and that something was in the house, something he questioned. As he took a baseball bat out from under his bed, I could sense the fear in his voice. I heard the floor creak downstairs, followed by the sound of plastic shattering and banging. I sprung to my feet and looked to my dad, who was already up and walking towards the door. Bat in hand, he told me to follow behind him, which I did hesitantly. I followed him into the hallway and down the stairs, turning on lights behind me. I felt comforted by the lights and my dad's presence, but was still waiting to see the figure at any moment. After entering the kitchen, our eyes were drawn to our screen door, which was now a mangled plastic frame on the ground. What the hell? My dad said, completely confounded at the events that had just played out. He shut the sliding glass door and proceeded to question me. I told him my plans to sneak out and what had happened. He was just happy that we were okay and continued to call the police. I knew it was gone, but I still decided to turn all the lights on downstairs. My heart continued to pound, and I sat on the couch to relax as I waited for police to arrive. I was safe now. The figure never returned since this happened. It was a year from today, but the memory still haunts me. I feel uneasy being alone in my house or in my neighborhood. Even during the day, I always had the feeling that it's there, wanting to come inside to watch me. I'll never know what it was or why it fled when I came inside. I'll never know why it was in my room or if it was human. Since then I've just been trying to convince myself that it never happened.